Today, as I said, my theme is to worship you as I ought. And it's the beginning for us of a new series, which I'm calling Christians Behaving Badly. How we get religion wrong and what we need to do about it. Now, I need to introduce this first of all, and there's two things I need to say. When I say Christians, I mean us. It's very easy for us to stand and point at other people doing the wrong thing, or look at those Christians, they don't behave the right way. They don't do what they should. But that's also to get our Christianity wrong, because our Christianity needs to be focused primarily, first of all, on ourselves. And that's the first thing for us to remember. So when I say Christians, I mean us. And second of all, if you never get to see anything else, if you don't listen to the rest of my sermon today, and if you don't hear the rest of the series, these are the three things you're going to learn. What we get wrong. First of all, we put self before other. Second of all, we put appearance before reality, and we put effect before cause. Now, I'll explain what I mean by those as I go along. I'm going to explore some of them in particular today, but you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. But I'll just ask you, as you're listening to what I have to say, just reflect on, do you think there are other things that I've perhaps missed out? These are the three principles that I boil it down to, but you may find others and I'd love to hear them. So, putting self before other, putting appearance before reality, and putting effect before cause. So what I want to do is ask, what constitutes true worship? And we're going to begin with this question. When is it okay to break religious and ceremonial law? Now, we read two stories earlier on. The first one we heard was the story of Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. What Carl read for us is really the preface to the ministry of Samuel. You heard a little bit of a reference to Samuel, but this is Samuel as a child, before he's even had his very first vision of the Lord. This sets the scene for that story. And you heard the corruption of these two men who are taking advantage in many different ways. And you only heard one of them then. There's another one referred to later on in the story. They're taking advantage of their position for their own benefit. Now, as you read through the Old Testament story, I want you to realize that actually it's not an isolated incident. Hophni and Phinehas are not the only two who get it wrong. And you may well know other stories in the Old Testament. So, for example, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, get it wrong. And even Samuel's sons, as you go further through the story, Samuel's sons also become corrupt, and he is unable to control them in the same way that Eli has been unable to control his sons. So it's not an isolated incident. Okay, so there's that. But then you can see the problem when we consider what we read from the Gospels. Because what we read from the Gospels was an incident of Jesus and the disciples breaking the religious and ceremonial law, and they were criticized for doing so. To which Jesus responds, "The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." So the question is, well, how do you answer this question? When is it okay to break religious and ceremonial law? Now, what Jesus was talking about is really what the Apostle Paul talks about when the Apostle Paul says there is no salvation in the works of the law. This is precisely the principle that he's referring to. There is no single thing that you can do which makes you a spiritual or religious person. On the other hand, there are certain actions that some religions ban that don't necessarily make you bad either. How are we going to determine this question? So, what is it that constitutes true worship? I hope you can see it's not an easy question to answer. Now, when we look at Christian worship, there's very little guidance given in the New Testament as to what Christian worship looks like. I wonder if you can think of any. If we look at the Old Testament, there's plenty. So the Old Testament, the first 5 books, contains many laws about what Jewish worship should look like. But for Christians, we just don't have that same level of guidance in the New Testament. So what I've done is I'm going to show you another passage, and this is something that Swedenborg wrote, and this is in his little book, Charity. And he wrote this: external things of the body that are of worship are, and there's 4 things: regularly attending places of worship, listening to sermons, singing devoutly and partaking of the saying of prayers, kneeling, and the sacrament of the Holy Supper. Those are the 4 things he lists there. Now I wonder what you think about that list. Well, let's just go through it, shall we? First of all, regularly attending places of worship. Well, you're all here, so good on you. But too bad if you're not. Okay? Too bad if you're not. Second of all, listening to sermons. At which point I'll just let you know that as you leave this morning, there'll be a list of questions for you to answer, submit by Friday, and I'll mark them and get them back to you on Sunday. How's that? Third of all, singing. Well, yes, we've spent time singing today. But would you say that your singing was devout? And what do we mean by that? What is devout singing? Is it enthusiastic singing? Is it with a sense of reserved holiness? Does it have to be in tune? Do you have to like what you are singing? One of the interesting things is if you attend a mosque, one of the things you'll notice they do not do is singing. Because for a devout Muslim, singing is a distraction. So they have nothing to do with singing in their worship. Now the second part of point 3, of course, is saying prayers. Yes, we've done that today, but kneeling. What if you can't kneel? And the 4th thing, sacrament of the Holy Supper. Yes, well, the Holy Supper is something that's identified in our church as our most holy act of worship. So that's okay. But then the 5th thing I want you to notice about this list is what's missing. Can you tell me what's missing here? It's the reading of the Word. The reading of the Word is not on this list. So it tells me that this is actually not an exhaustive list. Because if you say this is what happens in worship and you don't have the reading of the Word, I don't think you can say it's exhaustive. So note that Swedenborg says that these are external things of the body that are of worship. And the only word I think that really gets to the heart of the matter here is devoutly, singing devoutly, because it suggests something in addition to the singing itself. a way of singing as much as anything else. It suggests something which transcends the doing. It's a quality to the doing. So I just want to say that there are no inherently spiritual actions. An action, by definition, something we do in this world, is a physical, natural thing. There's no thing that you can do that makes you a spiritual person. It might be a spiritually focused activity, but it's still a natural activity. So we talk about songs. There's no song that you can magically sing that makes you a Christian. There's no style of music that makes you Christian by singing it. There's no action that can make you a Christian person. There's no action that can make you a spiritual person. So how do we do it? How do we become spiritual? And there's clues in the gospel. I'm going to read one of them. The story of the widow's offering. Now Jesus sat opposite the treasury and saw how the people put money into the treasury, and many who were rich put in much. Then one poor widow came and threw in 2 mites. So he called his disciples to himself and said to them, "Assuredly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury. For they all put in out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in all that she had, her whole livelihood." It was an all or nothing sort of a deal. So it's not about the action itself. It's not about how much you give. It works on an entirely different level. And that's where the devoutly comes in. It's the spirit with which you do the thing. So I want to talk about styles of music. What religious music do you enjoy? You've got a favourite piece of music or a favourite hymn that you enjoy? Any suggestions or thoughts? I'm sure you've got plenty. Here's the opposite question. What hymns or styles of music don't you enjoy? Have a think about that. What don't you enjoy? So why should you sing those hymns you don't enjoy? What do you think? Why should you sing the hymns you don't enjoy? And here's the answer. Because someone else does. Because someone else does. Can you sing the hymn you do not enjoy with the same enthusiasm as the hymn you enjoy because someone else enjoys it? So that is what it means to put other before self, rather than self before other. This is what I'm talking about, this how Christians get worship wrong, how we get religion wrong. Now, I've often heard people look at a particular style of worship and say, oh, that's not worship, it's entertainment. It's just entertainment. That's all that it's doing. But entertainment is an interesting word. To entertain means to provide someone with amusement or enjoyment, one, or to give attention or consideration to an idea or a feeling. So often in our worship, what we are doing is entertaining our own ideas and feelings. We are giving that consideration over another form. So it's very easy to look at someone else's worship and say that's just entertainment. It's much harder to look at our own worship and say, well, actually, that's entertainment too. I'm entertaining myself in this process. And that's what it means to put effect before cause. To put the outer manifestation of the thing as more important than the reality that brings it about. There's a lovely story later on in the second book of Samuel of David dancing before the Lord. I wonder if you remember that story. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant finally into Jerusalem. And David dances before the Lord, and I imagine it as this great joyous outpouring. Finally, the Lord is coming to my capital city. And so he dances, but there's someone watching him, and it's his wife is watching him and judging what he does and saying to David, you have made yourself such a fool before your people, before all these young maidens watching you dancing. And she's doing that. She's judging this outpouring of David's, which is true worship, I think. Hers is not. My mum's name is Joy. And one of the things I remember from my childhood is my mum telling me what joy means. And I wonder if anybody else has heard this. Joy means, I can see you nodding, Jesus first, others second. Yep, so I learned it as Jesus first, yourself last, and others in between. That's what my mum told me. And that's the principle of worship. Jesus first, yourself last, and others in between. If we're unable to do that, I want you to realise that we are no better than Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who go to that great cauldron of meat with their three-pronged hook and scoop some meat out for themselves, or even worse, go to the meat, the person offering and saying, give me the best bit before you then go and offer to the Lord. This is what we become like. And this is one of the reasons for me, having children or considering children in a service of worship is so important. Do you know, it's not so much for the children's benefit as ours. Because for a moment, for 5 or 10 minutes in a service of worship, we put aside our own feelings, our own desires, our own thinking, and we concentrate on a child. And we concentrate on the message the child hears, and we value it for that. The children's hymn. We lower our standards to sing something that's perhaps a little infantile, less intellectual, and we join in with enthusiasm because the children enjoy it. And do you know what? I think that's our best worship, because it does that 3-point principle. Jesus first, yourself last, and others in between. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bring that 3-point principle to every stage in our worship life? And so that's what I'm going to challenge you to do as we go through this series of Christians behaving badly. Looking at the way we get it wrong and see if we can understand how to get it right.